All right, so like this past week, just a few days ago, I started teaching my 9-year-old daughter guitar. She started showing some interest in wanting to learn guitar, and I haven't really worked with a lot of like absolute beginners, especially younger kids like her, to where it might be a little bit more of a learning curve to learn something brand new like that. I haven't worked with a lot of guitarists like that, so I kind of had like an idea in my mind like what I was going to show her the first night, and it just like she didn't get through all of the stuff that I had like in my mind to like teach her. So I kind of wanted to like put together kind of like a absolute beginner like lesson tutorial on like what you should practice and like work on like the first like 30 days that you pick up the guitar. For somebody that's an absolute beginner that has like never touched a guitar, played a guitar, or played any instrument similar to the guitar, this is like a brand new absolute beginner course idea and like what you should practice and do for like the first 30 days. So this is kind of a rough idea. You may start working on this stuff and realize that you're blowing through it way quicker than like I'm saying in this video, or you may realize the opposite. Maybe it's taking a little bit longer, and it just depends on the person. So don't get discouraged if that's you. Like, you will eventually get this stuff down, but this is just kind of a rough idea of like what you should do for the first like 30 days, but it should be pretty accurate. And if you guys are watching this video and you're like, hey, I'm like a bit above this level, I don't think this stuff is going to apply to me. I already know this stuff, I understand this stuff, but I am somewhat of a beginner, and I am frustrated. I don't know what to practice. I don't know where to go to get good at metal guitar. I left a link for my full course, which basically covers all that. It basically covers exactly what you need to practice and learn to get good at this style of guitar, and how to structure an effective practice routine to where you don't have to practice for hours, but you still like are playing the stuff that you enjoy, and you're not playing like repetitive scale stuff. So check that link out if that's you. All right, so let's talk about week one. So I put this together. I came up with this idea in the sense of like somebody that's going to practice like maybe 20 to 30 minutes a night on average. So just keep that in mind as we go through this stuff. So first thing you want to do is you obviously grab the guitar. You want to kind of figure out like a comfortable position for you, because there's different ways to hold the guitar. You're probably going to start playing like sitting down. Eventually maybe you'll like graduate to standing. I never really did. I just like to play sitting personally. It's easier. You can kind of like lean over the guitar and like see what you're doing, and it's more I don't know what the word is, like involved, I guess, so to speak. You know, it's kind of more intimate, I guess, with the guitar when you're just down here like jamming away versus like standing. But you know, if you plan to play in bands on stage and stuff, then eventually you're going to want to stand. But right now, I would say just find a good chair that you can sit in and a good position so you can hold. Depending on what guitar you have, I'm assuming that you have something that kind of has a spot here for you to hold it. If you have like a flying V, then generally it's going to be the V section kind of goes in between your leg here. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm saying there, but so this right here is kind of a common way that a lot of people will hold the guitar, or putting it on, so your right leg and then your left leg. And if for some reason, or if you end up being like left-handed, then it would be the opposite for you. So this way, I think personally is more comfortable. You know, like classical guitarists will have like something like underneath their foot. I can't really show you, you can't see, but they'll have something underneath their foot. Sometimes I'll take this old yoga block that I have, and it's probably like 4 inches in depth, and I'll just set it down and set just my left leg on top of that, and it kind of props it up more to where I can sit up straight. Because if you're like sitting down playing guitar, bending over for long periods of time, especially when you start to get older like I am, it kind of wears on your back a bit, and it can, you know, cause some problems. So the straighter up and down that you can sit, the better. So kind of find a comfortable position for you, whether that is, maybe this is the way that you want to do it and you're younger and you don't really care about your back at this point, or it doesn't affect you, or maybe, you know, finding like some sort of a couple books or something to put under your leg might be a better bet. I know that my daughter's 9. She's playing just like a full-size guitar, so she kind of has to have it on this leg because otherwise she can't reach these first frets. If she had it over here, she'd be like reaching. She could probably reach to about here. So, you know, just keep that stuff in mind. Like, find a good position, a comfortable position that you think you could play for, you know, 30, 40 minutes without much problems, you know. And if you have to get up once or twice, that's fine. But I would just say find a position that you're comfortable in to play for like 30 minutes straight. So next is tuning the guitar. So you want to get yourself a tuner, whether you go down to the music shop down the road or you order one on Google or you just download an app. There's free apps out there. The one that I use, I usually use one on my guitar or GarageBand program that I record and have my amp sims on, but I have one on my phone that's called Guitar Tuna, which works just fine. The thing about Guitar Tuna, though, is I believe it only will tune to standard tuning. So if eventually you want to tune to some like different tunings, then that one might not work for that. But I think they have like a Fender tuner app that will tune to different whatever tunings you want. So just find yourself a decent tuner and then figure out how to get your guitar in tune. And you want to kind of memorize. I would say there's a few like theoretic ideas that you want to understand. Like, a lot of people don't like the idea of learning theory because they think it's like really, really complex and you got to learn all these scales and notes and chords. And it kind of it can be, but there is a few theoretic ideas that you definitely want to understand. And one of them is going to be like how the fretboard is set up. So the first step to that is understanding in standard tuning, like what each of these notes are, what the open strings are. So from the big string here, the one on the top of the fretboard, it's E, A, D, G, B, and then E again. So this is technically considered, this low string here, the big one, is technically considered the bottom string because it goes by pitch. So this is like the highest pitch, so they call it the top. This is the lowest pitch, it's called the bottom. It gets a little bit confusing for me when I'm trying to explain stuff, so I might accidentally say top string, bottom string, but I'll try to do it right. But that's generally what people will consider those as. And if you like look at the guitar like this, like you're playing a piano or something, it is, this high string is actually the top. And when you're reading tablature, which we'll talk a little bit more about tablature later on, the bottom line is the low string. So we'll get more into that. But just learn the E, A, D, G, B, and E. Memorize that this first week. You want to understand that. So let's get into actually what you're going to start like playing and like doing. So you'll probably want a guitar pick. With metal, it's pretty much impossible to get the aggressive type sound that you want to get when playing like riffs and heavy stuff without a pick. I mean, I think not Dimebag, but I think Zakk Wylde at one point had like his thumbnail grown out, but that's kind of, I don't know if you want to do that. I would just say learn how to use a pick. So I'm not going to get too much into pick holding. I think right now it's just, you just want to kind of figure out how to play some notes. But what I will talk about is you definitely want to have a good grip on that pick and cover most of the pick with, you know, your couple fingers. If sometimes people will hold it with 2 fingers on the back and then the thumb on the front, or just the first finger and the thumb. Just however you feel comfortable holding it, just make sure that you're covering most of the pick and that it's not going to like shift around and slide and fall out of your fingers as you're playing. So the first actual like playing that I want you guys to do is just pick some of these open strings. So the bottom 3, so these 3 right here, just I want you to just down pick. I don't want you to try to go down and up, which down and up is like a it's called alternate picking, and that's a technique on its own. but you don't want to learn that now. Like you want to, let's just focus on down picking. So just down pick these open notes. Just keep doing that until you feel like you can do them. You know, you don't have to do them as good as I just did, but probably to about there, to where you're pretty comfortable that you can actually do that without missing strings or screwing it up. Make sure that this hand right here, the left hand, is not blocking those strings, because if you're touching that note, it's a dead note. It sounds like that. So make sure that if you don't hear that note ring out, then figure out what's going on, whether it's this hand that's blocking it or this hand or maybe your thumb, something. Just figure out what's going on if you can't hear these notes ring out, and then just continue to pick these open notes for a while. That might be, you know, half of your first day, depending on how long you play for that day. And then next, all I want you to do is just with this first finger here, the pointer finger, start on this first fret, the one all the way closest to the head here, closest to the bridge, and I want you to just push down on that fret. And when you push down, you want to have your finger like curled. You don't want to have your finger straight like this. You want to have it curled, and you want to push down with just this tip of that finger. And don't worry too much about getting it perfect right now. You just want to try to get a note out of it, but that's going to be the way you want to do it. And when you do push down on this fret, eventually it might make sense right now because it's going to be easier to push down right in the middle of the fret. Is going to be the metal piece that's like that. You're not going to push down on that metal piece. That's the fret. You're going to push down in between. So if we were in between like this nut and the metal piece, or in between the two metal pieces if you're on one of these other frets. So maybe just go right in the middle and push down, because right now, without having the strength and the calluses on your fingers, it's gonna be a lot harder to push down on those frets. So eventually what you want to do is you want to push down as close to the far fret as possible, so that as close to the metal fret that's closer to the body here. That's where you want to push, as close to that as you can. But right now, go ahead and just push down right in the middle of that fret, and just take this first finger and just push down, lift up, push down, lift up, and just do that a few times until you're able to get a fairly clean note out of it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but until you're comfortable and you feel like you can hear the note, and it's okay. It's not going to ring out perfect in the beginning, but you want to have some sort of a note come out of that. So just down pick that, pull off, push down, pick, pull off, push down, pick, pull off, push down, pick. Do that for a while until you get comfortable with that, and then start going from fret to fret. So start on this first fret, move to the next fret, and move to the next one, and do this all the way till you get to this 12th fret, which the 12th fret on most guitars is going to have the two. Mine has the line, but on the top of it has two dots, and you probably have two dots either on the top like me, or might be actually on the fretboard. So go all the way to the two dots and then go back. And then just do that a bunch of times until you're comfortable with that. You feel like you can do it okay. You don't have to go real fast, but you want to be able to do it fairly clean to where you're not stopping for long periods of time. And then take the next finger, your middle finger, and do the same thing. And then keep doing that between, and use all four fingers, even the pinky. And just do that between all four fingers until you're comfortable with that. And that's probably going to be most of what you want to do in this first week. But if you get to the point to where that's something that you can do fairly well, then just pick a fret, maybe the 5th fret, and just go between two fingers. So now we're going to start with the 1 and 2 fingers, so the pointer and the middle finger. We're going to go 1, push down. So start on the 5th fret, pick with that pointer finger down, and then push that middle finger down on the next fret over, so the 6th fret, and do that again. So And every single time you push down on one of these frets, you want to pick. You don't want to hammer on. You want to pick each of these notes. And then once you're comfortable with between those two fingers, do the same thing between all the fingers. So now just anchoring off of this first finger on with all the other fingers. So 1 and 3 finger, 1 and 3 finger, 1 and 4. And do that till you're comfortable with that, and you can do that fairly well. And when you go between these other fingers, so when you go between the 1 and 3 finger, jump over 2 frets so that you're going from dot to dot when you're going between the 1 and the 3 finger, excuse me. And then when you're going between the 1 and the 4, the 1 and the pinky, the index and the pinky, go over 3 frets so you're now on the 8th fret. And when I have my hand on the fretboard, so in a perfect world, my hand would basically, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4 frets. My hand just kind of sits here, and then I maneuver it around as I need to. And in a perfect world, my fingers wouldn't go anywhere else besides here, but obviously that's not gonna ever happen. There's times when I need to stretch over to here, or there's times when I need to be like this, or so there's times when you're gonna need to steer away from these 4 frets, but generally, if I have nothing that I need to move my hand for, I just kind of have my hand in that position to where it's like, I have, 1, 2, and 3, and 4 frets pretty much covered. All right, so as far as like actually practicing on the guitar, that's all that you guys should worry about in the first week. And just every day practice that stuff. Once you get one of these ideas down, move to the next one and just keep practicing this stuff. And then each day when you come back, warm up with what you did the day before, and then try to move on to something new. And then a little bit more about the fretboard, kind of like I was talking about. One of the main ideas that you're gonna want to understand and learn as far as like theory goes is like understanding the fretboard and how the notes are laid out. So you can kind of think of the fretboard as like 2 fretboards as far as like how the notes are laid out on the fretboard. So if you don't know much about music, the musical alphabet is basically A through G. So this 5th string here, the second to lowest string is an A note, so I'm going to kind of explain it off of that. So this open note is A, but then this 12th fret note is A as well. So this is G. So it basically goes A, G, and then back to A. So basically, when you get to this 12th fret on all the strings, the entire fretboard, all the way up and down all these strings, that is the same notes as all these open notes, except for it's just 1 octave higher. So in a sense, once you get to this 12th fret, the fretboard just starts over. So the way the fretboard is set up too, with like the dots and stuff, this first dot here, so the 12th fret, obviously we talked about, open note is the same note as the 12th fret. That's like kind of the nut here in a sense, is the 12th fret. And then this first dot here, actually not this first dot, but the 3rd fret first dot is the first dot on, like when you get down to this fret, to the 15th fret. And then the 2nd dot here, or actually, yeah, the 5th fret dot is the same as the 2nd dot here. And it lines up all the way down. So you don't have to learn all the notes from fret 1 through 24. You just have to learn the notes from fret 1 to 12, and then it starts all over. So with that sense, the fretboard gets really a lot smaller and way more easy to understand once you kind of realize that it's kind of like just 2 of the same fretboard, but just on 1 fretboard. All right, so let's talk about what you're going to do in week 2 now. So obviously you should be tuning every day. First thing, you should make sure that you're in tune. So take your tuner, retune. Probably not going to be too out of tune unless your guitar's stored in a place that the temperature changes often, or it's cold, or depending on like how nice your guitar is and how it's set up, it probably won't come out of tune very much. But just make sure that it's in tune every day. Turn that tuner on, tune up first before you start playing, and then warm up with some of these ideas that you practiced before. So, you know, the single note with each finger, and then the warm up with that stuff for like 5 or 10 minutes before you start to get into the newer stuff that you're trying to work on and learn. Now, what I'm going to have you guys do is we're going to use the bottom 2 strings now. Instead of just this very low bottom string, we're going to use the A and the E strings to fret. So up on the first fret, just do this. So 1, jump over to the next fret. So fret the first one on the low string, jump down to the A string on the second fret, and just do that all the way down the fretboard. And then do that with all the fingers. And then once you get that down just using one single finger, do that same idea again, kind of how we did. We picked 1 fret, which a lot of the times I'll just pick the 5th fret for some reason. It's kind of my favorite fret, but do that same idea that you did last week, to where you're going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, but instead of on just that string, go between the E and A string. So 1 on the E string, and then A string, E string, A string. So 5th fret, 6th fret, 5th fret on the E string, 6th fret on the A string. And once you're comfortable with those 2 fingers, do the same thing to where it's E string on the 5th fret, and then A string on the 7th fret. And then the 5th fret and the 8th fret with the pinky. So as far as actually like playing for week 2, that's all I'm going to show you guys. That should get you enough, and if that's not enough, then just continue to practice those ideas and get good at those ideas. I do want to talk a bit about something that is one of probably the most important ideas when it comes to like playing guitar in general, but specifically like metal fast, like, you know, metal riff. It's finger independence. So finger independence is like, it's going to be with your fretting hand, your left hand is the idea. And it's the fact that like this, like your pinky and your ring finger can kind of move separately. Like a lot of the times, which you'll probably notice for yourself too, if you're a beginner and you're actually watching this as a beginner, that a lot of the times when you try to move one finger, all the fingers move, or at least, you know, some of them, like the pinky and the ring, are probably the worst ones. So like practicing and intentionally trying to get better at ideas that make these fingers to where you need to move them independently, and teach your fingers how to move and independently is important. So one exercise that is probably the best one that I've ever done, which is, it's kind of boring, but you know, it's right now you're pretty much going to just be doing boring stuff for the first month. What I do is I'll just put all 4 fingers, you know, again, I'll pick the 5th fret and go 5th fret, 6th fret, 7th fret, 8th fret, like I've explained before, basically 1 finger on the next fret for all 4 fingers. And I'll just do that on the 4th string, which is the D string, so the 3rd string from the top of the fretboard. And I'll just keep all of my fingers down except for the one that I want to move. So we'll start with the pinky, and I'm going to move the pinky up and then down to the bottom of the fretboard, and then to the top of the fretboard, bottom of the fretboard, top of the fretboard. And just do that a few times and make sure that none of these other fingers, or the idea is that none of these other fingers are coming off. And that might not be possible for you at first, but if you keep working on it, then it will. And then just do that between all of the fingers, and just do that a few times, this is something that you could just have part of your warm up, and this is going to help phenomenally, a lot, phenomenally. I can't say that word, but it's going to help a lot with finger independence and ultimately hand synchronization and being able to actually play fast and heavy riffs and like play guitar. It's going to help so much. All right, so the last idea that I want to talk about for week 3 is about tuning by ear. I want to teach you guys kind of how to tune by ear because I think it's important. It's another idea as far as like understanding how the fretboard's set up. So I'm gonna kind of explain like how these strings are like relate to each other in pitch in for each note. So on the 5th fret, again the 5th fret, on the low E string, if you pick that note and then you pick the open A string, you're gonna notice that if you're in tune, those notes are the same. They sound the same. It's the same. So 5 frets away or 5 frets up on the string above is going to be the same note. So if you jump to the A string and you do that between the A and D string, same circumstance. Same thing when you get to the D string between the G string. But when you get to this 3rd string, the G string, you got to jump over to the 4th fret because just the way that the fretboard's set up, it's only 4 half steps away between the G and B. But then when you get to this B string between the B and the small E, back to that 5th fret. So that's a way that you can tune your guitar by ear. So if you just take your tuner and you tune one string, so probably the low E string is generally what people do, make sure that one's in tune, and then just try to tune the next string, the A string, by ear. So I'll knock that off a little bit. Now I'm not in tune. You can kind of hear how I'm not in tune. You hear that like wavy sound. I'm not in tune. Now I'm pretty close again. So try to start doing that this week instead of tuning all the strings with your tuner. Just try to tune that low E string and then go tune all the... and then go tune all the rest of the strings by ear. So for week 3, warm up, just keep working on some of the ideas that we've already discussed, like the single note between fingers if you're still having trouble with that, and then between the different fingers on the same string and then the opposite strings, and then maybe just the 2 or 3 ideas that you're struggling with most. Work on those, because eventually it's going to get to the point to where if you work on all this stuff, like your warm-up's going to be the entire practice routine. So maybe just if you're comfortable with this and you're like, I don't need to work on that anymore, and then cut that out and just start working on the stuff that you're struggling with a little bit more, or some of the newer stuff that you haven't quite got yet. And 5 to 10 minutes warm-up with that stuff is generally all you need. If you decide that you want to practice longer, if you want to practice an hour a night, in the beginning I probably suggest that you don't, because it gets pretty tiring. It's like anything. If you just start working out and you start working out like an hour and a half every day, you're going to be pretty sore, and probably, unless you're really motivated, you really have a good why, you're probably going to give up. So I would say I wouldn't go over maybe 45 minutes a night. But if you're really into it, you're like, I just want to freaking play, I want to play, then practice a little bit more if you want. So those warm-ups can be a little bit longer, 10-15 minutes if you're going to practice longer. But I would say for somebody practicing 20-30 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes of that warm-up is probably enough, and then start working on some of these other ideas, because a lot of this stuff that we've talked about, you can see is kind of translating into these next ideas. So you're kind of going to get practice with that stuff, with the newer ideas and stuff that we're working on. So this week we're going to learn power chords. So I'm not going to get like real in depth onto like how chords are built and like the whole idea of chords. I'm not going to get theoretically into like what chords are and stuff, because that's just like that's a different video. I'm not going to talk about that At this point, I don't think you guys really need to know that, or if you already know it and you've been a musician before, then you already understand that. But if you don't, I'm not going to get real into depth on that. Eventually, it's something that you probably want to learn and understand. Definitely want to learn and understand like how chords are formed and like what makes a chord and the differences between chords. But right now is not the time. But I do want to teach you guys what is called a power chord. And the power chord is going to be like the most simple form of a chord. Most chords are going to be 3 or more notes. A power chord is only 2 notes. So it's this like easiest chord that you can form. And when you're in standard tuning, it's just, we'll go to the 5th fret again, my favorite fret. So if you push down with your first finger on the 5th fret, and then you go down with your 3rd finger, your ring finger, down or up a string to that A string to the 7th fret, so from the 5th fret dot to the next dot, and you push down on both of those, that's a power chord. So those 2 notes make up what is considered a power chord. And power chords are very common in metal. I'm trying to think of like a power chord song that I know. Oh, let me see. I don't know if I can play that one. It's one of the first riffs I ever learned. That's wrong. Anyways, that's a Metalcore riff. I can't remember how to play it. But there's a lot of metal songs that incorporate power chords. Specifically, a lot of like older Metallica and stuff do. So we're going to practice that. So all I want you guys to do is take those 2 fingers and just strum that chord. And then lift up those 2 fingers, put them back down, and strum just those 2 notes. Just those 2 strings. And kind of get that chord figured out. Get comfortable like lifting your fingers off and pushing them back down. And then once you get comfortable with that, go to the 1st fret. And then I want you guys to do exactly what you've been doing all the way to the 12th fret. Well, you can go switch. I was going 2 frets, but just do 1 fret. And then back. And you can use your pinky too if you want for power chords. I like to do that. It feels more comfortable for me. A lot of people don't, just because sometimes people will play like 3-note power chords, which also incorporates the next fret down, or the next string down, or up, technically, the next string up, that D string. And you're playing those 3 notes, so you're like the first finger on the 5th fret of the E string, 2nd finger on the 7th fret of the A, and then your pinky on the 7th fret of the D. And that's another form of power chord, but you only really need to play the 2 notes. So a lot of the times guitarists will play it just with their pinky and the first finger because it's more comfortable. So you guys can kind of make the decision what you want to do, but I would suggest that you start playing it with those 2 fingers so that you get in the habit and teach your fingers how to like stretch out that much. I mean, you might have bigger hands than me and it's like no big deal, but if you have kind of smaller hands, then you want to definitely teach your fingers how to spread out like that and get comfortable doing that. Take that same idea, but we're going to do what kind of something that we've been doing before between the 2 strings here, but it's called arpeggiating. So an arpeggio is basically like a chord, but played single notes instead of strummed. So we're gonna do that just between the 2 notes. So start on this 1st fret again and pick just the 2 notes single, and then move to the next fret. And then just all the way up and down until you get comfortable doing that. And then the last thing I want you guys to do this week with power chords is I want you to switch power chords strumming. So we're going to play a power chord starting on this 1st fret of the E string like we have been doing, and you're going to play that, but then you're going to jump 1 fret over and 1 string down. So now you're playing that power chord off of the 2nd fret of the A string, and then the 4th fret on the D string. So, and then each fret you jump back up and jump back down. I can't even do that. And then keep going back, and then once you guys get comfortable with that, then you should be ready to move on to what I have for week 4. All right, so week 4, just again keep warming up with some of these ideas that we've already practiced that you're struggling more with. So some of the ones that aren't so difficult now that you're like, oh, that's easy, I can do these 1 finger little things, like no problem. Maybe don't worry about that, but incorporate some of the other ideas and make yourself a little 5 to 10 minute warm up. And I would definitely do that finger independence exercise you could honestly do it for like 30 seconds a day, and within like probably a week or so, you're going to see huge improvements in there. And to be honest with you, I would say a majority of guitars, especially like self-taught metal guitars, don't even do stuff like this. So if you got to where your fingers can move separately without lifting these other ones up, which would probably take you only a week or two, like you're going to be a step above most metal guitarists that have been playing for a year or even longer. So now I suggest that you guys learn how to read tabs. So if you don't know what tabs are like music notation, but they're kind of designed for guitar, and they're much more straightforward, much easier to follow along. A lot of guitarists will use tabs to learn songs, and that's kind of the main way that the main like musical notation that guitarists use to learn songs is tablature. Musical notation is a bit more complex and a little bit more complicated, and doesn't really make as much sense when learning how to play songs on guitar, unless you're like in some situation to where that's what is required. Like if you're a classical guitarist in like a symphony or something, and that's how you guys like perform and read music, then learning and understanding music notation is going to be necessary. But if you're not in that kind of scenario, I'm not saying that you should never understand how to read staff and musical notation. I know how to do it, but I couldn't like learn a song real quick doing it. I understand like the concepts and what like the spaces and like the lines mean, and I understand how to read it, but I couldn't go like learn a song like really quick and just play it as quickly as I could learn tabs. But learning tabs, I think, is going to be your next step. So it's fairly straightforward, fairly easy. So I'll just kind of give you guys the basics of learning tabs. I'm not going to get real into detail on it. If you guys need more information on it, just look up how to read tabs, and there's going to be a bunch of stuff out there. So when you look at a tab, like a picture of a tab, kind of like I mentioned earlier, that bottom string is this bottom string, the low string here. So it's almost like looking at it, the guitar sitting like this, like looking straight at it to where the high string is on top. That's kind of how the tabs are set up. And then the only other thing you really need to know is that if it says 2 on that string, like for instance, that bottom line says 2 on it, that means you're playing a 2nd fret of this low string. If it says 5, it means you're playing the 5th fret. It's just what number is on that tab is what fret you're going to play. And then if it's like, if it says like 2, 5, 7, and it's like 2, 5, 7, like one right after each other on the tablature, that means you're playing the notes individually. If it has those notes stacked up, like if it has, like 5, 7, 7 on these bottom 3 strings, and it's like stacked up on top of each other, it means you're strumming the chord. So that's pretty much all you guys need to know at this point for reading tabs. There's a lot more like kind of ideas and stuff that are important to learn, but at this point you don't really need to know all that stuff. So now it's pretty much time to learn like a song or a riff. That's what I would recommend next, is like find a pretty basic. I wouldn't learn a whole song. I just find like a riff. So like some of the first riffs that I ever learned were like just simple like Nirvana songs and like Green Day songs, or even some of the like easier like power chord Metallica type stuff were like the stuff that I learned first. So what I'm gonna do is I will take a riff that I think is a good one for beginners, but it's actually not a good one for beginners in a sense. So it's a song, or it's like the first riff from a Trivium song called like Light to the Flies, and it's probably a little bit too complex for you guys right now. Definitely too complex because it's played at a fast tempo, and it's probably a little bit too difficult, but I'm gonna simplify it and slow it down and basically teach you guys that riff, or have that at the end of this video to where you guys can like watch me play it and you guys can see the tabs as well, and try to learn that riff. And I'll play it slow enough so you guys can kind of see what's going on, and then also read the tabs. But then I'll also have a couple like basic exercises that I just came up with myself that you guys can learn and play as well. And the last thing that I want to talk to you guys about is what is called drop tuning. So specifically we're going to talk about drop D tuning, because that is going to be the closest drop tuning to E standard, which is what you should be tuned in. So the only difference between E standard and drop D is that the low E string here, remember how I told you that this note is the same as this A note here? So now get it tuned in. So these are both A notes here on the 5th fret. So the only difference when you go to drop D tuning is that now this note here on the 7th fret is going to be the same as this open A. So you basically lower this string one full step, and that gives you drop D tuning. So it's a lower tuning. And now the drop D, or the low string here, let me tune to it real quick. So now these two strings here, those are the same pitch, and then the same pitch on the 7th fret as that next string down. So you have a couple ways that you can tune to that. You can use your tuner if it tunes to different tunings, which you'll be able to get a D on any tuner because that's a D string. So you can tune that string to a D with your tuner, or you can go off of the 7th fret like you should have been doing already off of the 5th fret, or you can just pick the 4th string, the D string, and that bottom string too, and then match up those two pitches like I did. And now you're in drop D. Anyways, that's kind of the riff that I'm going to simplify for you guys and slow it down. And then I think that's a pretty good one for you guys to learn in the beginning, as long as it's simplified like I'm going to do for you. So other than that, I think this should probably get most of you guys pretty set for the first 30 days. And I think if you focus on this stuff, you're going to see results and see progression so much quicker than somebody that had no idea what they're doing, or tries to go learn like a bunch of scales and chords and open chords and stuff, and tries to like go and learn songs right away. Nothing wrong with learning scales or learning open chords. It's just that when it comes to metal, especially like metal riffs, like that's not really the stuff that you're going to use on a regular basis. I learned the pentatonic scales and the positions of the pentatonic scale, which is, if you don't know what the pentatonic scale is, it's just like a 5-note scale. And that's generally what guitar teachers are going to teach you right away, is like the pentatonic scale. And I learned that, and I know all the positions, but I don't really use it when I'm playing metal riffs. Like I'll mess around and just like kind of solo and do some blues stuff every once in a while, and just like play. Or just mess around, but I don't use it when it comes to like playing like riffing and metal type stuff and riffs and stuff. So the stuff that I'm showing you guys right now, I think is going to benefit you so much more for this style of guitar, and I think you're going to see a lot of progression and improvement, and kind of, get some motivation if you do this in the first 30 days.